those reasons. Lovely. So I think in the interest of time, we will be hopefully having 2 other workshop leaders joining us later. So that might be Abubakar Bello and Blanca Leon, hopefully, if their internet situation allows. But for now, there's just 3 of us, which is still fine. So we'll get going. So welcome to everybody. Thank you so much for taking time for this. These are first year that we're organizing these workshop writing sessions, and it is really to open up our grants, to show who are behind them, and to get also a feel of what's difficult, what might be useful for developing people's ability to gain those grants, and to explain what's behind these grants. And so we have 16 attendees today. We had a whole number yesterday, about hundreds. So today is a bit calmer. You have more chance to be interactive. So do open your mics and post questions in the chat. Our aim today is to discuss the 2 grants we have open from IAPT and to tell you what we're looking for in those grants and give some basic guidance of what mistakes to avoid and what really to try to remember to include. So help you to get your proposal even better. Obviously, these guidances are general for any kind of writing in science, especially any other grant writing. So keep in mind the generality of our points. Don't just think, oh, that's for small grants. If we talk about something related to small collection grants, maybe the point is also valid for research grants. So keep your mind thinking, what's general here? What can I apply in my actual research every day? And there might be many, hopefully, tips. So book about 1.5 hours. That's what we're aiming for. As we go through the basics, before you know it, an hour is gone, and then half an hour or more interactive, looking for examples from you about your proposal. Hopefully you've gotten some basic ideas written down already that you could share in the chat box, and we could then comment in a very constructive way to help you to think what else to add. Are these good? Or if you have any doubts, raise those questions. This is a safe space. We're here to give you guidance. Use that today. So let's start with introductions. So there's 3 of us leading this workshop today. I myself, I'm Tina Saarinen. I'm a vascular plant botanist and a systematist based in Scotland in the Northern Hemisphere, but I'm originally from another Northern Hemisphere country, Finland. So just to point out, I'm not native speaker. I try my best. My accent is different, but do understand most of us scientists are not native speakers. So be okay with it. We are making it in science without knowing English as a native. We're learning. So we don't expect you to be perfect in that language. Do express yourself freely. We will try to understand each other. I run the IAPT grants as the chair of the grants committee. The committee is co-chaired by Blanca Leon, who hopefully will join us later today. And there are 13 other members. And as a group, we review these grants and we keep thinking, what can we change every year to make them better, and make them more open, make them more easy for everybody to start applying? Because we want to be broadening who applies. We have biases and we're aware of them and we're trying to make a difference. So now I'd like to pass the introductions to Vinita Gowda and then to James Boatwright.
Thanks, Tina. Tina, there are some people, someone's messaged me saying that they're not able to get in. I think they need to be let in, I think.
You are absolutely right. So apologies from my side. I'm taking the admin role here for the first time for the Zoom. You're absolutely right. It was my fault. So those who are just joining us, apologies for delay in admitting you. So we've just started with introductions, everybody who's recently joined, and I've introduced myself as the chair of the grants committee, and I'm now passing it to Vinita Gowda to introduce yourself. And if you can mute, can you mute your cameras or mute your microphones if you're not talking, please?
Perfect. Okay. So I'm Vinita Gowda. I'm an associate professor in one of the Indian institutes right in the center of the country called Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research. I'm a plant systematic ecologist. I have been primarily working with gingers and monocots, but also we've also branched out now to many dicots. So I'm going to introduce you to the small research grants. Are we going to go straight to the small research grants right now? Or we're
Not
going to
yet. It's just to introduce yourself, then James, and then
all
Abu
right,
is
perfect.
just
Okay,
joining us
sorry.
too. So then Abu after
Okay.
James. And then we'll start a broader introduction to the IAPT grants and then very soon to you, Vinita. So over to James. Thank you, Vinita.
Hi, I'm James Boatwright. I'm from the University of the Western Cape. I'm a systematist working on legumes, Asteraceae, and various other families. I'm on the IAPT Council working in the nomenclature committee, but I have previously been involved with reviewing of the grants, specifically the research grants.
Great, thanks, James. And then over to Abu Bakar Bello.
Hi, good morning, everyone, or afternoon. My name is Abubakar Bello, and I'm working with Umar Musa Eradua University, Kazuna in Nigeria. But I'm currently working with the German Center for Integrated Biodiversity, IDIV, and the University of Leipzig. I am coordinating a checklist of the vascular plant of Nigeria. I have also applied for a counter funding synthesis funded by the Horizon Europe. It is also a project that gives access to taxonomists to visit international herbaria and access the materials that are there. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us to give tips how to make your application successful. So now we've introduced ourselves who are organizing this meeting today. We'd like to get a little feeling to you. So rather than being able to ask everybody to introduce yourself, we'd like to ask you some questions. So firstly, first step in that is to ask, can you open your camera so that we can see you? We'd like to get a bit of a picture of who's with us today. And whilst you're opening your cameras, please, if you can, everybody who's attending, please do put the cameras on for a moment. You don't need to keep them on later. I'd also like you to put in the chat box where you're from. You can express it as a country or country plus the broader region, just to give us context. And if you're a hybrid case of I'm from here, but I'm based in here, do express that too. That's reality these days. So go ahead and put that in the chat box. Introduce yourselves. Are we seeing any reactions?
Yes, people are just starting to.
Nice. And thank you for putting cameras on. We'd like to take a picture. Would somebody, is Vinita able to take a group picture?
I can take
Or
a
are we
picture.
having enough? Is it better to do it at the end? Because we will have people trickling in.
Yeah, well, let's do it to the end just because also the presentation needs to be removed. So I think when we're
That's
done,
right. You're right.
Yeah.
Best that way. Thank you so much. So yes, we are getting people from South American continent. So there are people saying morning from Brazil, and we also have I'm seeing many entries from India, so that's fantastic. You are opposite ends of, and we have people from China, which is fantastic. You are in the latest time zone, I suspect, so far. So Zhangji is winning in terms of the lateness. That's fantastic. So do express your questions in that chat box or raise your hands. So we try to monitor, or you can just open your mic as we go through the presentation. So to save time, I would start with the presentation now, and then we can take it from there. So we'll start with the overview of grants that we have open and we manage from IAPT. So the first one is the research grant. So if you see this acronym RG, we mean research grants by it in this presentation. And the second one is small collections grants. So that's SCG. And the deadlines for these are looming. So the first one is the end of this month, end of January 30th. That's the research grants. And there's a later deadline for the small collection grants. So you still have time to apply for both. And we'd like to just talk about general steps that we'd recommend you to consider when you're writing these grants, or any grants for that matter. Developing an idea. It's not a single big blob if you think it visually. It's lots of blobs. That's the take-home message here. The point is that if you break it into smaller parts, you start focusing more detail what you should and should not be thinking at each step, and it can help you. It can really start making the whole process a bit more doable and a bit less scary, and you get to a better result at the end. So to put this into bullet points for those who don't think visually, but they think in writing, the steps are really the 6 major steps I'm identifying here, that the way I'm breaking them is that, first of all, you're really meant to read the grant announcement. And then you take it from there, developing the idea, planning the team, writing your first draft comes only here. Once you've really developed the concept and played around with little drafts, and then you start revising it yourself, and by sending it to others to comment on. These could be your mentors, peers, and supervisors. So we'll start going through these steps now shortly. There is the previous presentation where we went even more. We spent more time in these parts as we were having less interactive session at the end. So if you want to zoom into any of these parts or really get a bit more about these parts, watch the first presentation from December. That should be available from the IAPT membership area on the YouTube. So that just to start looking into each step, the first step is about reading the grant call. In this case, the small collection grants or the research grants. Read on the IAPT website, is this really matching what I'm wanting? Is this matching with who can apply? And we'll go through those here too. So you're in a great position. You don't need to maybe go to the website right now. But make sure everything ticks. Also reverse the point. Think about, does my idea fit that call? Not only do I fit the call as an applicant, but the idea. Is it the right size? Or should I change my idea to fit the size of the funding? Right? We'll talk about this a bit more. So the second step is exactly that. You're meant to think about your objectives, budget, and timeline, and in the context of the size of the grant and what the grant is wanting, right? And here, remember, if you're in doubt, is mine really fitting? Is it quite a usual request? You could always look our previous success stories. So you can go to the website, and under each grant type, you see previous successful projects. So you can see, oh, what did they apply? Is this fitting to the grant call? Are there examples of similar projects I'm thinking? And to show this idea of the step number 2 in a different way, James Boatwright really kindly helped me to visualize this in one of the previous sessions. It's about this kind of triangle, this kind of interactive thinking between these 3 balls, juggling them, thinking, okay, here's my objectives. I want to do this. And then you realize, oh, actually, to do all that, budget, oof, that's a bit too big. So you go back and make the objectives a bit smaller. Then you go back to the budget, you revise it, and it fits. Great. Then you look at the timeline and realize, okay, budget fits, objectives fit the budget, but it's going to take too long. And you revise these 3 things, right? There's an interaction. Try to do that. It really makes you propose something more realistic and specific. And suddenly, we see that too, and we like it, we award it more points. So the next step, we'd like you to, or we kind of recommend you to think very separate, is the team. Who will you interact with? Who will you collaborate with? Are you going to visit somebody and they will help you, or you're also training them? Is it both ways? And will you train somebody, for example, will you interact with students, and in what institutions? Will you interact with volunteers? Are volunteers helping you to process or digitize in the herbaria? Mention those people and mention the type of interaction. Collecting permits, we're mentioning it here because this is a collection-based research field. And if you are making new collections, we'd like to see what permits you have in place, or if you don't have them in place, how long these permits will take. Do you know where to apply for these permits, and so forth. All of that makes it sound like it's more realistic, it's more real. You know what to do. You are an expert already. That makes us feel more confident in giving that money. And then comes the first draft. So this is where I say, and this point will come clear later on too, we'll talk about this more, detail, detail, detail. What I mean by this isn't like you need lots of text. What I mean by is rather than saying a vague sentence without numbers, perhaps think about, can I specify, when I say I will do a taxonomic revision of group X, can I specify, can I say 15 species? Instead of saying the group, can I specify or add to it that it's 15 species? Just to, again, give something, or if you're going to propose to digitize how many specimens. Those kind of details just make it, again, more real, more specific, more, it feels like you know what you're applying the money for. So that's what I mean by detail. And again, at this point, you really want to check that that what you're developing fits the budget. So, not forgetting these first steps. So all you've done here is helping me to make that full draft. And then comes a step where you can revise your own proposal. You can be your boss. Imagine you take a different hat and think, what would my mentor or supervisor say when they would read this? And one of the ways of doing that is to check the grant call. What is it asking you to do? And then check that you've said that very clearly and bluntly, and that you fit the original grant call. Have you made point clear? Could you add a figure, a map, perhaps an introduction to your study group? Figures really help. So think them at this stage. Is there something I could add to make the story more easy to understand for us who review it? Because this is the first time we're going to hear about it. And then the final stage, get feedback, get ideas from others how to make it better. So we do not anymore ask recommendation letters. So those people that you would ask recommendation letters from could be people you sent your draft to get feedback. You could also contact previous grants winners that you can see the names on the website. You could ask feedback from colleagues who have done something similar. Maybe not this grant, but like Abu Bakr is saying, you gained experience, you've applied for one grant. You start being able to give advice, really, how to enhance somebody else's proposal. You look at it from an external point of view. That gives you that possibility of spotting omissions. So do think that. I'm going to admit further attendees joining us. So those are the general steps. And I would really like to now ask if Vinita or James have anything to add here, or Abu, any kind of general tips that you would like to share, or points to questions to raise.
I don't have anything right now, just because I think I know that we're going to have more details for the other two sections.
Yeah.
But if anyone has any specific questions, please ask, and also please introduce yourself. I'm requesting again. It really helps us know who the audience is, and if you're not asking the questions, we can ask the question for you if we know where you're from and what your backgrounds are.
Thank you. James, anything to add, or Abu?
Nothing yet from my side.
Great. And Abu?
Also, same from my side. I think you have highlighted the most important things.
Yeah. Great. And we will start zooming into this in our examples. So without further ado, I'd like to now introduce the first grants we're going to talk about that we have open, and this is the small collections grants. And before we start introducing the details of what the grant call includes and who can apply, I really want to take a moment to say why we want to fund small collections from IAPT. So small collections are herbaria or fossil collections or fungal collections that have less than 100,000 specimens, and they are registered in the Index Herbariorum, the way IAPT defines it for this grant call, right? So let's bear that in mind. So these small herbaria, or small collections, as I should say, they really make an outsized contribution to our biodiversity knowledge, the knowledge of biology of these organisms as a whole. And the reason I say that is that it's becoming very clear there are entire areas of the world that people say there's nothing available in GBIF, there's nothing available digitally on a global level. That does not mean we have no knowledge, right? And what we want to make a difference is that these I'm just trying to mute participants. Great. That does not mean we know nothing about these areas. What we'd like to make a difference here is to support people who work in areas that are not globally much known. We don't have access to seeing those digitally, but who maintain herbaria and collections in areas that are highly diverse of them, but not globally known. And we'd like to support them, give them a voice, maintain collections in those areas. Often when we do look into what's in these collections, we realize that our understanding of diversity patterns, threats, or traits, or even species lists change dramatically. We discover new species, we discover something that was thought to be rare becomes common, or vice versa. So just that in mind, I'd now like to pass the talking stick to Vinita Gowda to introduce these small collection grants from IAPT. So over to you, Vinita.
Thanks, Tina. What we're going to do now is just walk you through different factors. So remember, Tina already showed you the blobs and how those blobs now will apply to the small collections grant and later to the research grants. So the idea of this SCG or the small collection grants is to support and enhance small collections. And these collections need to be registered in the Index Herbariorum, which means that you have a code assigned to you. When the herbarium was included in the Index Herbariorum, I think we have to give a list of specimens that are already there and the size and the scale, etc., of the herbarium. So that needs to match what is expected or what is called as small collections in this IAPT framework. And you can request for funds, or the grant can support topics such as digitizing your collection. So let's say you have the collections, you've never digitized it, or you have partially digitized it, and you're going to use this, you can use these funds towards completing the digitization or initiating it, because equipment is also included in this grant. Or you could use it for manpower if you're using assistance to get to that digitizing part. You can process specimen backlogs, that is, and the backlog could be either entering data, which means that you will need manpower funds, or actually mounting it, in which case you're sort of, which is the last part here, which is the mounting important collections. So it could be any kind of backlog, as long as you're clearly defining what you mean by backlog with the specimens and the nature of that backlog, and that you're going to use the funds for those purposes. I think it should be possible for you to ask for the support. Third, which is an interesting but very important reason, is to request money for shipping endangered collections to other herbaria. Or sometimes, I mean, let's say in our case, we have to share it with other larger herbaria, so even that shipping cost can be included. The samples need not be endangered all the time, but it's something that you're sharing with the larger herbaria or a smaller herbaria or international herbaria, that shipping cost will be very high, because you're going to use a very specific kind of shipping methods when you're sending herbarium samples out. Next is to conserve, like you can use these funds to conserve current specimens, things that are already there. So either you're remounting it or you're improving your conservation methods within the herbarium. And oftentimes people change or improvise and improve as they learn more about how to do better with their herbarium collection. So that can also be requested through these grants. And lastly, like how I mentioned, it's also for, you can use the grant also for mounting important collections. And the important, it can be, needs to be defined by you, since you're proposing the grant, or you're writing the grant, or the principal investigator of this grant. The importance could be either because they are type specimens, or they are specimens from a region where you can't really access again, or it is from a very important project that is a long-term project which is running in your lab or in the region. It doesn't matter. So you just have to define important and not just say that this is important collection, because we want, the reviewers who are reading it need to know why you're calling it important. So be very clear about each word that you're using in your grant and specify why your grant needs to be funded.
This was very much the point where I said detail, detail, detail. That's absolutely lovely example. Don't just say important, say why.
Yeah.
Justify it. Lovely. I'm going to change the slide for you because I know only I can change. So there you go.
So the few common errors or details that the reviewers are looking for and are often missing, and so therefore it's we're just highlighting it. So some of them, not necessarily we've covered all of them, but you will get the feeling of what we're trying to get to. Is these are at least a few things that we've thought about that needs to be focused on. The first one is provide context to your collections. Again, if you're context to the herbarium per se, that is, what is the strength of the herbarium? Why does the support need to go to that specific herbarium? You could say something like you have this amazing algal collection or some collection from a region. Same thing as what I mentioned before, from a very specific region, or the highlight is one particular plant group. And that is also fine, because it is possible that that's where all the collections from that particular genus, order, family is currently present, because the expert is attached with that herbarium. So that also makes it quite an important collection. So provide that context to your collection. Identify small enough products that can be delivered within a year or so. And the question here is, what can a herbarium provide, or what is the product that we're looking for? The product is basically databases and sort of information that can be shared with the public at large. So either you can provide, you can enumerate in very great detail that you're going to have a checklist that you're going to share with the larger botanical community, with IAPT or some other already established herbaria. You can suggest that you're going to have a digital database that it's going to be linked to someone's website or to some, again, already established collection. It's good if you can show that you're going to have these collaborative projects such that you're going to deliver something. So the deliverables needs to be clear. If you're not doing any checklisting, you can still say that we're going to mount 600 specimens, and that's your product at the end. That is, you're going to achieve. So the targets needs to be very clear when you're saying what you're going to do with this funds within a year. This is right. So you want to aim for within a year and not give a 5-year plan, because the funds are very limited. So we know that you're not going to be building a new herbarium. We want you to just not be stuck with small problems in the herbarium. Then provide detail to database you will use and data you will digitize, like I just mentioned. And there's maximizing collaboration, training, and engagement. That is, give details of how many students are engaged in this process, how many regional herbaria you're in touch with, and local communities. And the local communities could just be where you're actually collecting the samples and specimens. So mention these collaborations in much detail. And in our case, for instance, we often offer our specimens to forestries. They don't necessarily take it, but that's something that we are always aiming for, that we have multiple duplicates, so that forestries who give us the permits can also take a specimen from us. So those details can be mentioned, saying that you're maximizing collaboration with people who provide you the research permits, researchers who are going to use it, and as well as additional samples for if you want to share it with a larger herbarium or a sister herbarium. Send out duplicates if you can. That is, again, if you have the permits to do this, it's encouraged that you share your duplicates, because we don't want all holotype, isotypes, and type, everything in the same herbarium. So it's best that you share it. If you can't share it because you don't have the permits, then too, I think it will be good to know that you've thought about it and you provide the argument about it and say that we're going to provide images and high resolution images, and upon request, and have a nodal person for that. So this helps us know that you're also thinking of sharing the information with in the best capacity that you can. And explain your products and impact clearly, like I mentioned before. That is, give very clear details about these databases, websites. If you're not able to do it, it may be not a bad idea, at least that I have seen, to kind of mention that I don't have resources to build a website, and therefore, while I understand the importance of it, I can't do it with this money. This helps, at least me, when I read the grant, it helps me know that the person has thought about it and knows what the issues are. So it's not about the idea not occurring to the person who's writing the grant, because sometimes I kind of wonder if, did you think about it? And it's not clear in a very short grant that you're expected to write. Next, please, Tina. The slide needs to change, I think. So what do we need in terms of documentation? Like how Tina mentioned before, there's no requirement of a recommendation letter, but you need to be an IAPT member. The budget needs to be clearly outlined, and we'll show you an image or example of how the budget looks like. The proposal is 2 pages max, and it includes objectives, plan, and timetable, as well as, I think, the references if you use any. And I think yesterday, James had mentioned, and Tina, that if you want to use references and not lose words in that space, then I think come up with a smart way of writing it in a nice shorter form. So there are abridged versions of how you can cite your references. So use that so that you're not losing your words and space in your grant. And a 3-page max CV, which means that don't give details that are not going to be applicable for IAPT or taxonomy or biology for that matter. So be specific to only mention research, education, and experience kind of backgrounds in your CV. You may be many other good things, but that may not help you in the CV. So use your space carefully, and it's okay to have it less than 3. So it's okay to have 1 page, but a very good solid sort of a CV. And here's the example you can see on your screen of how the budget categories are. So the budget, under the budget items, you can see that there's what we've listed here, for example, are camera equipment for digitization. If you can afford it in that 2,000, that is max that is being given. So clearly you can't buy, you don't want to buy 1,000 or more unless that's the only equipment that is a bottleneck in your herbarium. Barcode scanner, computer, external hard drive, labor costs, microscopy updates. You can't buy a microscope in that price. We understand that. And other supplies for curatorial improvements. Now, under computers and hard drives, a computer again is very expensive. So if you're justifying computer, you have to realize that it's not necessarily the biggest focus for any herbarium, but improving or updating your computer may be a better way of asking for money than for a computer or a laptop for that matter. So think carefully before you budget, add your budgets and budget items in this column. The next big item is curatorial improvements to collections, which means how are you going to improve your current collection or even in the remounting or rescuing of specimens. So that will include consumables like mounting paper, glue, the labor costs, and other supplies that you might think of, smaller things that you need. Like in my case, it's oftentimes labels and the acid-free paper and so on and so forth. So all of this can go under the curatorial improvements. Return of loans or shipping endangered collection to another herbarium. If you have received specimens to the herbarium, you can use these funds to ship them back. The postage cost is part of it. And the packing material, like I said, it's very, you need to have very clean and fine packing so that the specimens are not crumbled or don't arrive in a bad shape. So oftentimes the shipping is actually very expensive, although it's not very heavy. Labor costs again, because if that's what is required in your region, and again, other supplies for returns of loans or shipping. The last two items are field work to document important knowledge gaps. And this means that you're actually proposing that you're going to collect or add more samples or vouchers to your collection. And that will involve then travel costs, labor costs, and again, other supplies for field work, whatever that could be. And the travel costs here needs to be, it would be great if you can elaborate it and say why the travel costs are the way it is. That is, mention that it's for flying by air. If there are regions that you cannot actually arrive without taking a flight, in which case justify that. Traveling by road, in which case if you're paying for gas or petrol or diesel or whatever it may be, can be different in different regions. So justify that as well, saying the petrol cost can range from, I don't know, $2 to $4, depending on where I am. Also the staying cost, which is, we've not listed it here, but to stay and to find accommodation wherever you're doing collections is very expensive. When you go to remote locations, that can also be part of your fieldwork costs. And then there's a section we've added here for other items suitable for small collections grant. So if you have any questions from that, please ask here, saying, can I add this in the SEG grant, and so on and so forth. So that's.
I would really say there are no limits much, as long as you justify it, right? What we're looking is you justifying every collection is different. But please note, the lines in this template are not meant to be used each, right? So in your case, let's say you're wanting to apply for 3 items, then you can remove the rest, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to find items for each line, right? So it's just a template so that we see them roughly in the same format.
And in most cases, half of it won't apply because you have only $2,000. So you're not going to stretch it that much. So plan carefully what you're asking for and have the budgets items identified first. Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks.
And we will have an example later where we practice. We see somebody having put something in the budget and we play, how could we make that better? So hold on, there will be an example. Great, thank you so much, Vinita. I will now turn to research grants, and we have James Boatwright to present these grants and what IAPT is looking for. So over to you, James.
Right, thanks, Tina. Yes, the research grants are one of the, I think, important parts of IAPT because they want to fund capacity building, so human capital development in taxonomy. So it is focused specifically on early career researchers. If you are outside of the 3-year bracket of a PhD, you are not eligible to apply. So it really is targeting young researchers and graduate students. Again, as I said, the focus is on solving taxonomic problems. So make sure that the project that you have in mind will deliver outputs that feed into that, and then ultimately feed into the conservation of specific groups. So you have $2,000, right? So we will not be funding your whole project. But an aspect of the project that you should identify, if you remember that a cartoon that Tina showed with the budgets and the timeline and the objectives, so those need to be well aligned. And you can sort of elaborate your larger project very shortly, and then very specifically mention what you are asking to be funded. And we give some examples here of things that are often asked for. So travel to other institutions, chemicals or other things for laboratory work. Perhaps you need to have things sequenced at macrogen. Herbarium visits very specifically are also important. as much Vanita has pointed out the importance of regional herbaria, for example. So often you have to go and consult herbaria in a particular region for the work that you're doing, or a particular little, say, a species complex or something that you've identified as your need. And then, of course, field work. Sometimes we have to go to other regions of the world to do field work. For that part, it's important to already have thought through the project. Permits and those kinds of things are important, and reasonable or realistic estimates of flights, etc. So you have to do a bit of research before you put in the application to do a costing, for example. The travel to major herbaria is especially encouraged because this also leads then to networking and building connections, interacting with specialists, and in that way, then you build future linkages, perhaps spur on future work on a particular group. If you doing a particular graduate project, you might find a PhD supervisor or postdoc. So that's the idea, is to build taxonomic capacity and build taxonomic networks through mobility that is given with this $2,000 that you then ultimately get. So for the next slide, things to focus on is to provide the context, as we said. So it will ultimately be part of a larger project, but you must specifically give the context of what you are asking us to fund. And remember that when we're looking at these grants and assessing them, we are assessing feasibility. So are the aims aligned to the budget, and is the budget aligned to the timeline? Can you do this in a year's time with $2,000? So that's the question that you should ask yourself when you're applying for this. So small enough products that can be delivered in a year, maximize collaboration, and focus also, like we said, on new connections, whether these are regional or global. It is important that you focus on that aspect, and that's an important part as a developing scientist and researcher, establishing yourself or finishing a PhD, etc., is that these connections are important, especially within the context of the family that you're working in. There are many fantastic working groups on families, for example. So it's great to become part of those, or at least reach out or go and visit the collections where these people are based. And then explain the products and very importantly, explain the impact. I think impact is often something that we don't think about enough. What is the impact of the work that we're doing? What is going to change because of the project that you are proposing? You're resolving the taxonomy of a group. This clarifies the conservation assessments, etc. So there are clear impacts that you can elaborate. And this is often in the form of papers, so lists specifically. Again, this takes some planning. How do you envisage disseminating the work that you are going to do in this project? And also online keys, they are fantastic resources. So if you can make an electronic key as part of the project, then even better. So it's important to elaborate the impact and the outputs and how those link to the objectives and then to the larger project. So that golden thread must run right through the application. And then, so common errors is a poorly developed application where you haven't given thought to these things, or you are not concise and clear enough in the objectives and aligning this specific project to the larger project, but also not aligning this to the timelines and the budget. Okay, so those connections are very important. And then like we said, you have limited space, so make sure that you use a shortened referencing. So Boatwright et al., for example, and then only the journal, the volume, the year, and the pages. So that's often a good way. Instead of having full in-text citations, you can number your references, have a number in the text, and then the corresponding number in the references. So there are tricks and ways to to maximize your 3 pages, because you can see there your proposal is only 3 pages max. And your CV should also be included then. And again, this is a shortened CV. A 3-pager, for example, is the max. Again, as for this small grants, small collections grants, you have to have an IAPT membership. Please go and look at the website. We have different tiers of membership, and we also have membership targeting students, targeting especially students and researchers from developing countries or developing regions. So there should be a membership that will suit you, that you can find. And then the budget, Tina, if you can just show there, the template is similar to the one for the small development grants. You're not going to necessarily use all of the fields. And you can see that there are little labels for other. So if there is a budget item that you want to include that's not shown there, you can edit this template accordingly, and customize it to your project. And you submit this as a PDF as part of the your documents that you send into the IAPT. And again, you don't have to ask for the full $2,000. Don't ask for more than the full the $2,000. So plan your budget carefully, make it realistic, because again, if you ask for figures of money that don't make sense, that then shoots down the feasibility. So make sure that your budget is as properly planned as the rest of your project as well. Okay.
Thanks so much. Now we've received really nice overview of what these 2 grants are. It is very good point to raise those questions you are raising in the chat box, or you can turn on your microphone and ask, feel free. So any more questions about specific grant types, or is this allowed? Would this be seen positively? Anything like that, raise questions. I'd like to comment one question here. There was one from Kapil, and there is an acronym SHG. I wonder whether that refers to small collections grants, small herbarium grant, I believe. So I think I answered. But just to reiterate, those 2 questions we saw in the chat box, they were really, really helpful to clarify things. So yes, you can ask for publication costs. Small collections grant, unusual if you do so, but you can clearly justify it. You can try to justify, and if it makes sense, go ahead. Research grants, that would be more usual place where people do really, the outputs are generally publications. So yes, you're allowed to apply for that money. It's common, but I would highlight that IAPT cannot, what's the word, co-publish with you. So we can't offer that. Taxon is obviously done by IAPT, but we can't give you lower open access fees because you're a grantee. So sadly, no. Just to clarify that, if that was part of the question. IAPT membership can be done on the website. So we can try to get you the link. Good question. And is there any opportunity for the postdoc fellows, in the sense that if you're within the 3-year window from your obtaining your PhD, call it. I mean, in some sense, the $2,000 does not qualify as a fellowship, because it doesn't really give you living costs. It doesn't give you long-term certainty of income, but it can help you doing some products. But no, nothing more substantial. There are no fellowship grants available from IAPT. There might be others. And there was another question that I wanted to highlight, that if you have obtained your PhD more than 3 years ago, sadly, that is a hard limit. So that you're not able to apply for the research grant, just to clarify that. But if you have obtained a grant from IAPT before, that does not stop you from applying again. Obviously, if you're applying for the same topic, the same theme, the question is raised, you were already given money, what happened? So you should answer that in your application. If you apply for a completely different project, obviously that's just because you're an active person. So again, consider the fact that you're going to be flagged as a person who has received money before. Make a case of, this is different. What would this enable you to do? Be clear in your objectives and outputs. Yeah. Abu, I'd like to ask you, anything you'd like to add from your experience here in general about these types of grants we're advertising, what to think, what would help a person?
So maybe I would simply want to add to what James highlighted in terms of research grant, maybe where it involves travel. I mean, an applicant might probably want to have a molecular aspect in his work, and then he might not have the facilities in his university. So maybe as part of the travel, he can request to access laboratories where these facilities are available, where he can maybe extract DNA, do his sequencing, especially if the lab, or he was able to establish connection with the lab, and they can help him with the maybe covering the cost for the extraction and the sequencing. So that 2,000 might be, I'm sure would be enough for him to travel, and it can be justified. So this can now, reduce the burden on the host as well as his university where he comes from. So
That's a
probably, yeah.
That's a fantastic point. So collaborations come in all shapes and sizes. If you have those opening emails for that collaboration early, you might discuss if the host, the receiving host where you're traveling to, whether they have any funds available to support you.
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic point.
Mm.
Any other questions in the chat box? It's gone quiet, so I would say let's practice. So now we're coming to the more interactive part. We'd really like to hear from you. At this stage, considering the deadline of the research grants being 7 days away, we really would like to see your objectives being pasted in the chat box so that we can give you comments. Be brave. This is a great opportunity. We're going to be, you're in safe space. We're going to be constructive. We're going to identify the positives. So in the best case, you put your objectives or work plan or any sentences you're comfortable sharing, you put them in the chat box and you get lots of praise. You hear that actually you're doing a good job, that you've gotten to the level that, hey, yes, I've listened, I've paid attention, I'm doing it. So feel free to share them. I'm going to start walking through examples we shared in the first December workshops to identify cases and kind of patterns where people could enhance. They have a product, they have submitted something, and we clearly see spaces where they could make it even better. So I'm going to start doing that, and then at the very end of the examples, I'm going to start focusing on the chat box or asking if anybody wants to go forward and share theirs. So without further ado, example 1. And this is specific to the small collection grants. But again, the theme might be something you can apply in the research grants too, considering objectives, because in both you need to be very clear in your objectives. So the person, in this case, these are real examples. I've anonymized them by taking the herbarium acronyms out and the group names. The person submitted 3 objectives. And they say, review and update the taxonomic classification of vascular plants at this given herbarium. Systematize and digitize the collection and manage records of the collection by creating a virtual herbarium. We stopped at a time and we really tried to make you think, what could be even better? And these are the points, and these are very general themes that you'll see repeating in some cases that we identified that you really could make a difference. You could stand out by adding more detail of them. So number 1 point was mention the context, the background, and the importance of your herbarium, of those collections. As an example, you could add something along the lines of the herbarium X, where you work, contains so and so many collections. How many? How big is it? We would not know, right? Do tell us. And tell us that these are generally vascular plants, or maybe they are generally fossils. Tell us. And they're from a particular area, maybe. Maybe there's a strength, maybe there's a focus. Generally there is, right? Tell us that. Then you could give that importance by saying it's from poorly collected region with only so and so many collections available currently in GBIF. As an example, it gives us, it's like a relative measure. It's just an example. I'm not saying you always have to talk about GBIF, but it's a relative measure. So think about how you can show the importance. You can say how many type specimens you have, something like it. Importance is many, many things. So this is just an example. Yet estimated to include so and so many vascular plants. So imagine we see a very small number in GBIF, but actually this area is home to 4,000 vascular plants. It would give me, as a reviewer, a sense of real importance, right? And okay, yes, it's many characters and many words, but this is where you might make a difference. This is maybe worth it, and then reducing somewhere else. So avoiding repetition is another theme. So funny that there's this add detail, avoid repetition. But let's think about this for a minute. Objectives should be quite down to the point, and you should have some detail, but avoid repetition. And here we might see, we raise the question of review and update the taxonomy classification of plants and systematize them. Well, isn't that the same thing? So you could just simply get rid of this second point, the systematize, and just focus on digitizing. You're going to digitize them. And here you talk, in the third point, we talk about managed records of the collection by creating a virtual herbarium. Maybe that's to do with the digitization. And mention the specifics. How many specimens are you going to digitize? It would be less characters than this current text. And then rather than saying building or creating a virtual herbarium, explain what that is. Is it adding these images to a website that exists already, which is more likely, right? So often these small collection grants, the $2,000 does not enable you to build a website. It can be expensive and it's hard to maintain. Consider contributing to an existing. Perhaps regionally or nationally, there is a system that enables you to contribute as a small herbarium. Examples of this is Cria Species Link in Brazil, which I absolutely adore. So my knowledge is a little bit biased of these systems across the world. Another one is the Australasian Virtual Herbarium, which I see as a real hub of collections from across institutions. Fantastic. You're not building anything. You're contributing to an existing, and you're focusing on what you can only do, which is looking after your small collections. So think about those kind of details, and then add that detail. Yes, that third point was covered by the earlier. So hopefully that gives you a flavor of what these general advices are about. So getting really into nitty-gritty with existing real cases. In another small collection grant proposal, I saw an objective that was just short, down to the point, a sentence, right? We don't even have a bullet point or a number. So the general point was we will employ cutting-edge digitization and scanning technologies to digitize 3,000 records and scan 1,500 specimens. I'm loving the numbers. Yes, I get an idea of, okay, what you're going to do. But I still have spaces I would want to enhance this. I'm itching when I read this as a reviewer. So the detail on when you say cutting edge seems hollow. Why not to just say what it is? You're going to use less characters and words. So in digitization, normally the cutting edge is about the resolution of the image. So then mention high resolution images, and even better, mention the resolution. It's less characters than high resolution. It'll be obvious to us reviewers that it's high resolution if you say it's 600 pixels or 300 pixels per inch. Fantastic idea, right? Why not? Saving characters, winning detail. And and here, getting two different numbers can be confusing. If you are focusing on these very precious 1,500 specimens, which you've identified, this is important somewhere else, hopefully, why these ones, and what percentage that might represent of your collections would be helpful to see, then why not to do all of them fully? Becomes a question. You're opening a can of worms by offering two numbers, unless you justify it firmly later on. And use consistent terms. Here we see the word records and specimens. I'm guessing the person is meaning the same, then say the same. And you could then get rid of one of them and save space, right? So just pay attention. This is the bit where you can make a difference. By removing stuff that's unnecessary, you have space to add the important detail. Now we have an example of objectives from research grants, and this really highlights something very general, I find, in proposals of research grants. So here we have 3, they're numbered, and they say, study the phylogenetic relationships and evolutionary history of yellow corollas in genus ABC. Determine the dominant chemicals in genus ABC and explore the relationship between phytochemistry and phylogeny in genus ABC. Right, great. I see 3 objectives. They are quite succinct, but they're way too big. This is perhaps your overall plan for your 3 to 4 to 5 year long study. That is not matching with $2,000 IAPT research grant. And it is not helpful for us to see these overall objectives of your PhD as the objectives of the grant. So here, what I'd like to put across is that we'd like to see the objectives for the $2,000 you're applying to. That's the important thing for us. We're giving you this sum of money. We'd like to see arguments for that sum of money. Does that make sense? Hopefully that clarifies it. It's perhaps obvious, but we forget because you're in a different position. When we review these, that's our task, to make sure that the money we're giving matches what you are going to be gaining. So perhaps as an example of practice to think, what can you achieve with an IAPT grant itself? In this example, one way of doing it is you're going to argue that you need to collect species K, it's the name, not the herbarium acronym. You need to collect the species K from Madidi Mountains, and the species is only known from type, so we know it has yellow corollas, and it represents a second independent lineage of yellow corolla. So you want to sample it. It's important. And the only way to understand it is to collect it in the field. Fantastic. So you're applying for the money in the field work to gain this one piece of knowledge. Fantastic. Or you aim with this, the objective is to run phytochemical metabolomic analysis to screen chemical diversity in genus ABC. And here's a trick, you can say, to publish on the evolution of terpenoid saponins, I'm making this up now, in plants. So you're already giving even a hint of the output, right? Think about the output. So this is really that point already I'm making, that you could say, collect so and so many new specimens, give an estimate. How much do you expect to be collecting in this field work that you're proposing of this genus from the under-collected Madidi Mountains, and distribute these across so and so many herbaria in so and so many countries. That's your output. So in the same objective, you're already hinting to the reviewer that you're wanting to offer this for the $2,000 you're applying, and the output would be this. Real nice trick. Or you make an identification guide as your output. You're going to have to identify these anyway, right? You are able to already. Why not to make a quick identification guide based on the images you're taking in the field? And so this is just to open up that concept of what are your outputs. Try to identify small yet achievable outputs and verbalize them clearly. Then there's the plan section of our proposals. And here's an example of a plan from small collection grants. It talks about 2 parts of their plan, digitization process and online database development. So first it says each specimen will undergo a rigorous digitization process. We will utilize state-of-the-art imaging technology to capture high-resolution photographs of specimens from multiple angles. The online database development, we are committed to developing a user-friendly online database to host the digitized collection. This database will allow researchers to access the specimens. And again, you might have kind of heard when I was reading this aloud, that there were terms that sounded hollow, maybe unnecessary here. And when I say hollow, I kind of refer to this vagueness. So when we saw rigorous digitization process, well, what would be unrigorous? What does rigorous mean? If you mean that you're going to do cost effective, maybe say that and then argue why it's cost effective, or just say you are wanting to digitize. There's nothing wrong. That already stands out very clear and it's cool. But say how many specimens? What percentage of your collections? We will utilize state-of-the-art imaging technology to capture high-resolution photographs. Well, state-of-the-art is high resolution, so you might as well just say high resolution. I'm being devil's advocate here, but perhaps there was point to these terms in this proposal, but you could save a lot of words here in my experience. And when you say multiple angles, in flattened specimens in vascular plants, that's a very rare need. There is no need for multiple angles, but with good lighting and high resolution, right? So think carefully when you add these terms. This whole sentence or this paragraph makes me feel ChatGPT without a human brain, right? ChatGPT is great to get somewhere, but make sure there's no hollow words that is not needed, right? And multiple angles, was that really needed? Question mark. So think carefully, be a real reviewer, use tools like ChatGPT, but then really be the human researcher in it to make sure the text says sharp and very focused points. And here there's space for enhancement. And explain who will do what. So this is back to the team. You might be really aware that it's going to be student volunteers in your herbarium who's going to do the digitization and they need training. Then say that. That's going to again come across like you know what's happening, you know who's going to be doing what, there's a plan, good. Say how many staff members are there, are they full-time? Will they be in charge of this? Are they already trained? Nice, and add those numbers again here. Rather than empty words, add those numbers. Then we have a timetable, and this will bring some similar themes. So a nice way of putting a timetable is giving these month 1 to 2, month 3 to 4. Nice, I'm liking it when I first see this. It then gives for each couple of months, it gives some aims. Produce digitization and scanning equipment, establish digitization protocols and workflows. Great. Begin digitization and scanning process, continue this and commence conservation efforts to priority specimens. Nice. Complete digitization and scanning. Well, you can already hear Tina misses numbers saying, well, I need to see numbers. Why not to think it? Try to think. Have you already started digitization? Have you got some experience? Do you know roughly the speed? What would you hope to do in 1 month? How many specimens? Give a range, give an idea here. And then and then maybe add things like training and manual writing. You're likely needing a manual how somebody can repeat this process over the next coming 5 years. So say that you're doing it, add it in the work, in the timetable. Again, it shows you an output and it's in there. So it shows you've to us that you've really thought about the details. And finally, the budget. So do get ready to share your text in a minute. So this is our last example before I open it to use. So here, budget, here's a template, and they've only focused on the items that were relevant to them. So obviously this template looks different to the broader template we showed because they focused on items relevant for them. Fantastic. There are 3 lines. And where it says camera equipment for digitization, which is very common because digitization is a big need and topic, mention details. Camera model X with lens Y with a memory card, question mark. How will this work? Of the lights are an important point of this setup. Lights may not be so expensive, but again, think about these bits. If you're offering to do high resolution images, if your lens doesn't match that, that's an issue. So be open. We do not expect you to do bigger things than $2,000 worth. So if your lens you're offering to buy only matches certain resolution, that's okay. We understand there are limits, but be honest and open. If these don't match feasibility, our doubt is increasing, right? Software licenses, but then say what software, right? Don't just say software, add those details. So you can change these items here, right? Just if you were in doubt, you can't touch them. Yes, please do touch, add the detail here. You have space. You may not have space in your 3-page proposal or 2-page proposal. Here you do. So there you are. Bus fares, car hire, petrol, specify these. Be specific, add that detail. So just to clarify, hopefully that's helping. So examples from you. Have we seen anything in the chat box so far, Abu or James?
Nothing. It's just Vanita. You should let her in. I think she's trying to rejoin.
Understood.
But
Currently,
there aren't any questions.
I don't see Benita. Maybe she's given up. Sad. Apologies. It's hard when we're so few people and the ability to do the admin part is limited at the moment. So only I could do it rather than James or others. But let's see if she... I'm keeping an eye on that now. So would anybody be willing to share any parts in the chat box? Any questions? Please use us and your cohort. So the people who are here today, can I ask, has anybody received a grant already from IAPT? I saw that one person definitely indicated that is the case. Because you can use each other's experience, right? It's about giving you an opportunity to meet each other as well. So do highlight if you have experience with grants. So we get somebody saying, Janisha is saying, I tried 2 times. For those who have tried, I'm glad to see that you're here, and I'd like to hear from you. Have you seen something or heard today from us that helps you to think what you could do different to make your proposal better? Hopefully you can see items or things that you can see there's space to enhance. Ali, I'm wondering, I think, not at, hopefully this time. Okay, yeah, nice. So we do encourage people to apply again. Ali, I'm wondering whether you're talking to us or perhaps on the background. And Vinita is now joining us. So I'm going to mute you, Alishu, and do indicate if you're talking to us so that I know to not unmute you. Yeah? Welcome back, Vinita. So we're just discussing if people are happy to share their examples or ask questions about their proposals. We've come to the end of the examples. So anybody wanting to use this crowd to get comments?
Hello, ma'am. May I clarify my question that I asked
Of
earlier?
course, Kapil. Yes.
And so I actually wanted to ask, what if like we are from a small herbaria in Guwahati University, and just saying that if we plan to digitize the specimens that we have quite some of the most important specimens from northeastern region of India. And we are very open to sharing our list of species and specimens of herbarium sheets, whatever we house here at GUPH. And we are wondering if digitization might not be possible through publishing a database from our end. Then that's why I was asking whether it is possible for us to publish the data as a checklist via some journals for which we might be able to be funded via this small grants collection.
Understood. So you're thinking that $2,000 that would be available if you're successful wouldn't be enough to make your own database online.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
understood.
What if it is not if it does not suffice the
Yeah.
process of publishing a database as such? So
Right. So I would say you are talking about two different things to me. So they are two outputs anyway. So there is the publishing the database of specimens and their identifications to the public, you know, however you define it, however public you can make that. And then there's a different thing, which is a scientific view of that database, scientific curation of that database, plus perhaps other sources to publish a checklist. So I see them as two separate items. They are linked, and I totally understand it, but I would answer in two parts, if you may, and I'll pass to ask if others have different viewpoints. So my answer would be to publish your database to allow others to have access to it, call it. I would imagine contributing your data to a regional data bank, if there is, or GPIF hub for India, or even GPIF directly. That would not cost you anything and is very doable. So I would argue that might be a better way of giving access to your database. However, the publication, I see complete value to it. And if you're in a situation where you could have time to create this database, which must be a big task considering diversity in your area, that would have a publication cost if it is in an open access journal. However, if you're slightly, if you can lower that need of publishing in an open access costly publication, if you find publications that do not, they're open access but do not cost, and there are many of them. So I would encourage thinking that way too. So see what you can fit in your budget and see what you can do free and see which way you want to go, would be my advice. But there are no,
thank you, ma'am.
yeah, if
You have
that helps.
actually clarified the.
But there might be other viewpoints. So anybody else with anything to do with to wanting to add to Kapil their viewpoints?
Well, if for me, if a couple will highlight what they want to do with the money, and then it will probably help us more to advise them. Specifically, what they want to do with the money. Is it that they want to use the money to pay for the open access or what?
Exactly. That's true,
Actually,
yeah.
my PhD supervisor, who is the curator of our university, we actually want to apply this one, if it is at all possible, for digitization, mostly for the purpose of building a proper checklist or a database in any way feasible, so that we can make our herbarium openly available for a broader audience. So we are looking to that.
Great.
So even
Both of them.
for the digitization, I'm assuming that you have a checklist already because you will have to have curated specimens that you're digitizing. Is that what you're saying, or you're digitizing everything?
Ma'am, as of now, we currently have only the list and along with the herbarium accessions, but we have not yet been able to start taking high resolution photograph of the images and prepare a proper database. So that's why we are looking for grants.
Mhm. Because for publications, I mean, you can always go to Q Bulletin and talk to the editors there, and to Gardens Bulletin from Singapore. And Missouri Botanical Garden also has publications where checklists may be welcomed, if that's what you're asking for. And those you don't have to pay anything. I mean, it's just a publication if that's what you're asking. So I agree with Bello that I think it's not still very clear at our end what funds or what kind of publication you're asking for. Like if it's books that you want to circulate with people, which are, the old style that we used to have checklists, then that will require more money, I would say. But if it's a standard publication in a magazine, in a journal, from a botanical garden or a museum, those are you don't have to pay much. It's free in cases, and they can make exceptions as well, even if there's a charge. So So you may want to explore a little bit more. But or if it fits in this $2,000, I think you can justify it and submit it here as well. So I don't think we want to say no, because the justification needs to come from you. So does that help, Kapil?
Yes, ma'am, definitely. Like, it's now more clear to me as to how to approach towards writing our project. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Isn't it magic that we often, when we try to verbalize something to another crowd who are not knowing of your study or your situation, then things become so clear. It's kind of funny. This is so useful often to try to verbalize, to get pointers where to go next. Any other ones? Because it seems like we're coming to the end. We'd love you to turn on your camera so we can capture a quick photo of who was here today. Vinita is with us. Would you be able to try to capture that? So try to put your face on the cameras on.
Yeah, we'll have to remove the presentation so that everyone.
Oh, absolutely. Good point. Stop sharing. I'm so sorry. Really, so we have come to the end and we're just gathering if there's anything else we can help with, and we'd love to get the memory of you. If you can turn your camera on and have your face in it, we'd love to see it.
Okay, and everyone is here in one. I think we lost a lot of people, is that it? Because I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's right. So we might have lost a lot of people. So we now have 19. We had at least 26 at some point.
I'm seeing everyone only in one screen. Am I seeing everyone here?
We have 18 now.
All right,
oh, lovely to see you, actually. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a picture as soon as possible.
Ready for a picture.
Okay, all right. Everybody, keep your smile.